My name is Nevzet Celik. I am Doctor of Sociology and the Director of Paris Advanced Research Center. And today we have honor to hosting David Goldblatt. David is a renowned British sports writer, broadcaster, and also sociologist, journalist, and author. And among his notable works is the Games, a Global History of the Olympics. We are so excited to have you to discuss the Paris 2024 Olympics, covering various key topics with you. And first of all, thank you for joining us. And let's begin our discussion. My first question, what are your thoughts on the overall expectation for the Paris 2024 Olympics in terms of sustainability, inclusivity, and innovation?
Well, there's a lot of big questions. Let's see if we can take those apart. Let's begin with sustainability. I would say that the Paris Olympics has made a bigger and more successful effort to create a sustainable, ecologically responsible Olympics than hitherto, but the bar is very low, given that the carbon emissions of Tokyo and Rio, we're in the region of 3 million tons of carbon, and Paris is predicting 1.5, maybe a bit more. So that's a great thing. On the other hand, 1.5 million tons of carbon for 17 days of essentially TV sport seems to me a very large amount of carbon. Moreover, we're at a point where the possibility of reducing the carbon footprint of an Olympics, even if you have a no-build, super green construction standard Olympics, as we do in Paris, you still have 1.5 million tons, which is the output of, say, Fiji for a year, or a small African state like Burundi. And one wonders whether, given that aviation, as far as I can see, is impossible to make sustainable at the moment, and I don't accept any of the claims around sustainable fuels for aviation, we have a carbon bomb here. And the question I am asking myself is, can we really use part of what remains of humanity's carbon budget under conditions of climate crisis to move dressage horses and volleyball teams around? And I am struggling to see that that is a reasonable argument. Moreover, Paris rightly has abandoned the idea of carbon neutrality because the carbon offset market, which previous Olympic Games have used to try and balance the carbon books, is in such a disreputable, chaotic state, it is no longer possible to make those kinds of claims. So I would say overall, Paris has made a good effort. And, there are innovations like making sure that all of the facilities and all of the venues are connected to the national electricity grid, and therefore you don't need to use diesel generators, a major source of pollution and of carbon. But I think we're just sort of fiddling around the edges. And there is a much bigger question, not just about the Olympics, I would say, but all global mega events, given the scale of their carbon emissions. In terms of inclusivity, it depends what one means. Do we mean inclusivity as regards the athletes? I mean, certainly we have a pretty much gender balanced Olympics in terms of female athletes and female events and gold medals. And we probably have an IOC that is marginally more feminine in its senior kind of management than perhaps we've seen hitherto. So in that sense, we have a more inclusive games. How inclusive it is for the city of Paris, well, that is another question. Who is actually going to benefit from this? Where are all the long-term benefits and gains? Again, there are two sides to the argument. I think Paris has made a good decision to locate the main Olympic facilities outside the peripherique. And I understand that this is part of a longer term process of urban transformation in Paris that is attempting to link the banlieue with, what is traditionally elite Paris inside the peripherique. And certainly Saint-Denis is going to benefit from new transport links and a certain amount of infrastructure. On the other hand, I find myself saying, who will actually benefit from Saint-Denis changes? A very small amount of the Olympic Village will be available as affordable housing. The vast majority will be sold on the open market. The new jobs that are coming to Saint-Denis in terms of, corporates that are relocating around the Olympic Park. How many people who currently live in Saint-Denis are going to be getting those kinds of jobs? Or are they going to be coming from somewhere else in Paris? And clearly, the costs of the tickets are such in Paris that the vast majority will be going to people who are, comfortable middle class, whereas a lot of people simply will not be able to afford those. So I think there are real problems in the claims of inclusivity. And I suppose above all, what troubles me most, and again, Paris 2024 is not the first Olympic Games to be guilty of this, is the scale of moving people on, all the unhoused, all the homeless in Paris who are being cleared from the camps beneath the bridges at the Seine or Stalingrad metro station, or the
Refugees
squats
too.
in old factories. I mean, we are talking about 30, 40,000 people being displaced. And I just have to say, why do we keep doing this? Who are we kidding? Do we really think that there aren't unhoused people in Paris, that everything looks, like a movie set? It's like, let's stop kidding ourselves and let's
Exactly.
stop punishing unhoused people in pursuit of this.
I agree with you. It's definitely what some association also helping to protect the refugees, because the clearly Paris as an administration and the police, they want to kick them out from the Paris, but this is the reality. I mean, they are here, they are living with us. I didn't see the report, but when I see thousands of not only the homeless, also refugees, they kick them out from the Paris, the prefect. And also, as a Parisian, I live in Paris a long time. I was questioning myself why they didn't clean everything before Olympics. I mean, are we or not care for them to do such a things before they start the Olympics? This is another question for me. But it's in terms of inclusivity, what they did, it's right in certain project, but they should do really better, and including everybody, and they would be opportunity for, let's say, giving the opportunity to refugees, or to giving the better shelter to homeless. But unfortunately, they just want to remove them.
And, as ever, the French police proved to be very heavy handed in the way that they have dealt people. And this is not just folks who are sleeping under a bridge. We are talking about squats in big factories and otherwise buildings that are otherwise not being used. Hundreds of people being moved on, and to parts of France where they don't know anybody, or they don't have a job, they have no network. And of course, they'll all just be coming back. I mean, that is the logic of migration, is people go to Paris because there are actually opportunities in a way that in small town France currently there aren't.
And in fact, there is one recent research. It shows 52% of the workers in a restaurant and hotelier, they are refugees, they are immigrants. And this is the fact. I mean, Paris would not develop without them. This is the fact that we face today. And the next about innovation, what do you think about what kind of new innovation we have during these Olympics?
Well, we've got some new sports. Breakdancing is being introduced, and we have the new sports that were trialed at Tokyo, like skateboarding and climbing, and surfing, of course, out in Tahiti. Um, and that is an effort by the IOC to attract a younger audience. The IOC is rightly, as I suspect NBC, the main American broadcasters who pay for, to be honest, most of the Olympics, they are worried that younger people do not watch television. And they certainly, the old model of people sitting down for an entire evening to watch, old school television, 6 or 7 hours broadcast, sell a lot of advertising. This is just not happening. And the IOC has really struggled, as indeed NBC and the other broadcasters have, to communicate with the younger people on social media. I don't know if you've ever had the misfortune of looking at the IOC's social media channels, but they are literally the most boring channels in the world. No one is watching them. So I think it's a slightly deluded effort to try and broaden the age profile of the Olympics. I am personally unconvinced that it will succeed. I'm also of a mind that the Olympics needs to get smaller, not bigger. I'm just not convinced that adding more and more sports to what is already a gigantic operation is necessarily the right way to go. Other things in terms of innovation, obviously, we're going to have an opening ceremony that's not in a stadium, and we'll all be going down the Seine, much to the annoyance of everybody who lives along the Seine, I understand. I think that's an interesting form of carnival. I'm not sure. We'll see. Opening ceremonies, which are extraordinarily expensive. It's worth remembering, at Beijing, certainly, they spent $150 million, and that's in 2008. So that's the cost of a kind of Hollywood blockbuster, that you only play once. It's not like anybody streaming it afterwards, on Netflix. It's like a one-off performance for the same price as, a gigantic Marvel movie with a lot of CGI. The truth is, most of them are at best absurd forms of kind of global, signaling and communication. I'm interested to see how that works. To be honest, the thing I'm most interested in about the opening ceremony is whether Aya Nakamura is going to be singing a lot, which I'm sure, as you know, in France has been a very controversial proposal.
That's true.
The far right have been their usual unbelievably unpleasant selves about the idea, claiming that, in no way does the easily the biggest selling French language musical star in the world at the moment doesn't represent France. I am really interested to see how that plays out, particularly in the wake of the far right's, surge at the last elections. Beyond that, there are lots of small innovations. I think it's interesting that the Olympic Village will be presenting a much more vegetarian and vegan version of French cuisine, which I think would be is really interesting to see how they do that. I think you'll probably agree that French cuisine, not just in Paris but across the country, has really struggled with vegetarianism. And has failed really to produce actually very nice vegetarian food.
It's
So
quite
you're
hard.
relying on the Moroccans and the Algerian French, for some hummus and some falafel if you want a
That
decent vegetarian bite,
that
right?
could help, yeah.
So that's an interesting innovation. As I've said, in the environment area, the installation of connections to the electricity grid, I think, is a really, really good thing. And no one's managed that before. Partly it's a logistics rather than a technology thing, but this is a really huge, diesel generators is literally the most insane use of fossil fuels to be using when we have access to clean energy. And I think there has been a real effort on building standards and some really interesting and nice new architecture along the way. Not, often one gets that at Olympics. I think Paris has been very wise in that it is built small, and where it is built with high environmental quality. So I think all of those are important, small changes and innovations. But I think in a way, we're still in the same old groove. The model is still the same. You've still got to spend around $9 billion to put on the show. You still have to produce a gigantic amount of carbon. You still are having to sweep the streets to create a made-for television, essentially commercial spectacle. And until those things are tackled, we're sort of still, the Olympics is really as it's been for the last 20 or 30 years.
While you talk about 9 billion euro it will cost, and that's the huge budget. The consideration of this budget, what do you think it will be economic impact on the Paris and France?
Almost nothing. I mean, all of the evidence that we have, in particular, Andrew Zimbalist's book, Circus Maximus, looked at all of the academic studies done on the economic impact of hosting the Olympic Games and indeed the World Cup. And whatever the measure, be it employment levels, growth, productivity, tourism, the Olympics makes literally no difference at all. The last time the Olympics really changed a city and changed its economic fortunes was Barcelona 1992. And as we can see, be careful what you wish for. Because while on the one hand, Barcelona 92 introduced the world to this city that actually very few people knew anything about in those days, and really was a kind of hidden jewel. As a consequence, a gigantic surge of tourism to Barcelona over the last 30 years. And now they've reached the point where it's killing the city. Gentrification, Airbnb, crowded streets, overused public facilities. People are actually protesting on the streets of Barcelona, begging for less tourism. I mean, it makes me laugh that that would be a thing for Paris. Like, does anybody not know where Paris is? It's the same with Los Angeles. Like, really? You need to tell the world that you exist? This is just not true. So yeah. I think, in terms of the macro economy and the tourism economy of Paris, I don't think it will make literally any difference whatsoever. I suppose you could say there is an opportunity cost. You could have spent some of the money that you've spent on the Olympics on other things. But again, in the scheme of things, the amount of money is quite small. I mean, the construction industry, has done well. And as I can see, the police are doing well. Lots and lots of overtime for the gendarmerie over the next month or two, and lots of new surveillance and security equipment for the security forces. But that is not much of a social or economic legacy as far as I can see.
Well, thank you. You really explained briefly, but as a Parisian, last few days they start to build the roads, even for bikes, and we are not happy. We really don't know how to move and where we can go, which road is open. And you remember, like, you live in a COVID time. You need pass and you have to show the police and you have to go to the other corner. I have a friend who is running a coffee shop, nice coffee shop near the on the boulevard de Saint-Michel. He told me that last 2 days, 0 customer. It's almost 0. I mean, this blocked the Parisian and also tourist. And it's I think for the opening ceremony, they try to block all the building the next to river, the Seine. and if I am not wrong, almost 40,000 police and gendarmerie will be working during the Olympics. And maybe it's related to security, but also the maybe more inclusivity about participation of country that we know Russia is banned, but some people they are criticized why Russia banned but not Israel. And what do you think about this? I mean, in terms of current geopolitical issues.
Sure. What I think perhaps the most useful thing I can say on this is the norm for Israel, in that Israel has been getting a free pass in international sport for nearly a decade now. I mean, in the world of football, which I'm actually more familiar with, you know, the Israel has been breaking international law and breaking FIFA statutes for almost a decade by permitting teams based in West Bank settler communities, which is the occupied West Bank, according to the United Nations, to play in Israel's own leagues is absolutely counter to FIFA statutes. I mean, aside from the way in which they've treated Palestinian football and Palestinian footballers. And Israel really should be banned from FIFA, should be excluded from international football on the basis of this alone. And through, you know, it's mobilizing its diplomatic power around the world and its extensive alliances, it has managed to stay in. So I am not surprised that we reached the 2024 Olympics and Israel is being basically like, see no evil is the attitude. I myself, you know, think it's too late now, obviously, to do anything about it in official terms, but I think there was a very, very strong case for excluding Israel from the Games on the same grounds that international law has been broken flagrantly by the Russians with their invasion of Ukraine. I am really struggling to see that the situation in Gaza is not breaking international law.
I agree with you. It's I would say double standard, but you know, again, as you mentioned, Israel has been always pass for any international games and events. There are some protests against this, but I think their voices are so small, so weak. But they are doing.
I saw today, I mean, and you've got, you know, people from, is it La France Insoumise? Uh,
We
who are, you know, one of their members of parliament is saying Israeli athletes are not welcome and there have been protests. I have to say, I think focusing on the athletes is slightly unfair and counterproductive. You know, they are pawns in a wider game. I think the focus should have been on the Israeli Olympic Committee and the Israeli government rather than athletes, because I think
That's
it
true.
becomes too personalized, which I see no need. You know, there's enough bad blood around as it is without adding that to it. But I do think I do think there are real double standards.
My last question, and you can answer with few sentences. What is the main benefits and drawbacks for Paris hosting these Olympics?
Well, again, we sort of think Paris is one thing. And my sense is that for some people, there are great benefits. There are people who are making lots of money from Airbnb their flat. You know, construction companies have done well. I suspect a whole bunch of service companies who are supplying meals at the Olympic Village, or they're all just doing great. And I have no doubt, as with London 2012, that once the thing starts, there will be extraordinary moments and extraordinary things happen. I mean, that's the nature of the Olympics. You know, these are the greatest athletes on the earth doing their thing. And while I am critical in so many ways of the Olympics, I recognize that a cosmopolitan festival of humanity in a very fragmented world that celebrates humanity through the non-linguistic medium of sport is a powerful treasure. And there will be great things, I have no doubt, that will happen, and people will take great pleasure, possibly inspiration from them. The question, we need to be asking ourselves is that enough for 9 billion and a gigantic level of social and ecological disruption? And I am really struggling to make the case that it is.
It was a pleasure to talk with you. I really delighted. And thank you for again accepting our invitation and hope to see you in Paris.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. Have a
Thank
good
you.
one.
Have a
Hope you've
good
got
day.
your QR code sorted out.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Take care. Bye bye.